So I finished like this, that's too obnoxious, sorry. So I got a little distracted, but how many of you in the room are forage growers? Just by raising show of hands for our speakers, just have an idea. Okay, how about feeders or utilizers? Okay, industry. Okay, got a good mix of industry, some of both. Anybody else? Just, you know, there might be someone here just for fun. Okay, good. You never know. See it all. So that gives us a good idea. It's great to see so many growers in the room. We love to have our industry folks as well, but sometimes it can be a struggle with extension meetings to get our growers off the farm because they're so busy. So it's always really great to have you here. And that's why we try to do these things in the winter or early in the spring so that you can make it. But without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Jason Clark. He is with SDSU. He's our SDSU Extension soil specialist. He specializes in soil fertility and has done a lot of work in his, you have been here since 2018. I was a year off, 2018. He's done a lot of research work since that time. And he's working currently, we're going to have a meeting this week on nitrogen credits for corn and looking at how we can update some of the information in our soil fertility guide as the year goes on and as time goes forward. We always try to keep that research updated, but if you're at all familiar with soil fertility research, it takes a long time to get that data and make sure it's good data. So looking forward to hearing Jason today, and I think you that great. Okay. Without further ado, I'll turn it over.
All right, so I hope this mic is working. So grateful to be here. I'm actually, so corn is king in the Midwest. I'm actually from Utah where alfalfa is king. And so a lot of the research we're going to show you today has to do with some stuff I did while I was at Utah doing work there, and as well as some at the University of Minnesota where I did some of my graduate work there. So just going to briefly kind of go through a couple things here just to kind of reiterate. So this is kind of the nitrate recommendation. This is actually the updated version that we'll look at today. And it's just that we'll do this in bushels per acre, but it can very easily be switched to silage. And we're taking that yield goal, we're timesing it by a coefficient, which is about 1 pound of nitrogen per bushel of corn. We're subtracting whatever your soil test nitrogen is down to 2 feet. And what we're going to talk a lot about today is this legume credit. It can be anywhere from 50 to 150 as far as SDSU recommendations go, but we'll talk about some things there. And then the no-till and just kind of what that recommendation looks like if you're actually, convert it down to urea there. So those are some things we'll talk about today. And as I said earlier, we'll focus on the legume credits. And this is research we're primarily focusing on is work that I did at Utah State University with silage corn going after Roundup Ready alfalfa. And also some work that was done in the University of Minnesota and really throughout the Midwest is what we'll focus on today as well. So just looking at core nitrogen requirement, just kind of looking at broadly what that looks like. Here, so a lot of times when we take a look at our corn plants, we dig down a little bit for those roots. We're looking at where are those roots taking up that nitrogen, and it comes from 2 main sources. We're either getting that organic nitrogen and that's being converted through microbes in inorganic form and taken up by the plant. And then or else we're supplementing that with any fertilizer that it may need there. So the other thing we're looking at is, so what does that range look like in South Dakota? So these are about 45 research sites we've done since 2018. And the interesting thing here is if you look at what our y-axis is going to show here, we can see the range of nitrogen requirements through field research. We have anywhere from 0 down here all the way up to 200 pounds per acre. And what that really shows is that the mineralization, that decomposition of nitrogen that's happening in the soil naturally and providing it, that can provide up to 100% of our nitrogen needs, depending on that crop. So the question is how can you decide whether your crop needs 0 or whether it needs 200? And that's kind of the big decision that we have to look here. And we'll show some research of some ways. We're going to first go through some concepts, and then we'll do a little bit more into the results. So a lot of what we're looking at is when we have this, whether it's alfalfa or corn residue or soybean residue or whatever, it's on our crop. We're going to look at our nitrogen availability right here versus time. We're going to look, the green line is nitrate in the soil. This line is CO2 respired by microbes. And this is kind of what that cycle looks like over time. This first part right here is where that organic matter is decomposing. Our CO2 is increasing, which means the microbes are breaking down that carbon, breaking down the alfalfa or whatever's out there. And then while it's doing that, it's taking up nitrogen from the soil. We don't really think about that, but in the beginning, it's taking up nitrogen because it needs it for the nutrition to be able to break things down. And eventually we're going to get over there where we're increasing in nitrogen through nitrogen mineralization. So we're adding nitrogen back to the soil that the next crop can use. So the problem here is we got to figure out is this length of time varies when we get from this point to this point. Because when that crop needs our nitrogen, this is where we want to be. We don't want to be over here where we're reducing it in the soil. We want to be over there. So it's trying to figure out what that crop rotation looks like. So when corn or whatever growing needs it, it's there. And so this is just kind of, it all depends on this carbon to nitrogen ratio. So just some basics of it. If we look at this, we're looking at from 30 to 60, we're immobilizing nitrogen. It's taking it from the soil. We're not adding it yet. We're in this range right here, that 20 to 30. We're about 1-to-1 putting it out and taking it in. This down here is when we finally get to this time point right here with the green. This is when we're mineralized. We're getting our crops. So what do our crops look like? So our corn is about 57-to-1. Soybean down there. Wheat's clear up there at 80. And alfalfa you'll see is the lowest, has a range of 13 to 25, depending on when you're cutting that alfalfa. The quality there. So you can see that one actually is the lowest. So what that means is that's going to be the shortest amount of time to get to this green area right here where we're mineralizing it, we're kicking that out. Just as kind of some research that's been done to kind of show this. If we look at here, we have corn residue and soybean residue, and we'll show kind of what alfalfa might be instead. But if we look at this and we have, if we start right here for these sites, and this is over time, we'll see right here, and this is mineral N. What we're going to do is we'll see how this corn versus soybean residue does. So you can see at first it goes down just like we expected, like the other thing showed, but eventually that soybean is going to go up faster and that corn is going to kind of stay slow, stay down here. And if we look at this in a field setting, so that's a lab setting. So if we look at it in a field setting, we have our corn, our soybean residue, and we start October of the fall, and we go through October of the next fall. So through that whole growing season, what that corn versus soybean residue is doing, it looks about like this. So this is mineral nitrogen. So they're both going up slowly, but then the soybeans going to spike up. So we imagine alfalfa being even lower C to N ratio, it's likely going to spike up even faster and be higher with the research that we've seen. So just looking at that legume credit, a lot of what we're doing with corn is usually soybean corn. We have wheat corn, we have corn, and then of course we have the alfalfa corn rotation. So we know that that carbon nitrogen ratio likely controls the credit of how much nitrogen is being released. So this is a lot of the research that I do is this. If we look at these two, we look about corn, soybean corn, and we have this graph right here. It's a lot of work that I do on site. So we have our corn yield here. We put out different nitrogen rates to see how that response curve. So the question here is then, if you were to draw these, just knowing that information, how do you think they're going to be different? And this is actual research results. If you look at the results here, so that's our corn. You can see it kind of optimizes nitrogen about right there. It's about 160 pounds. This is our soybean corn, optimized a little bit lower. You can see we have a yield bump for the corn soybean rotation, a little bit less for corn, and we decrease nitrogen requirement about 40 pounds of nitrogen based on that rotation alone. And that's based on some of those carbon nitrogen credits or ratios that we've seen before. And so, and this is just comparing wheat and soybean because this is the most common that I had as far as this is South Dakota research results. We go after grow corn after wheat, we see about 96 pounds of nitrogen per average, soybean is 65. So you can see that there's that 30-pound decrease, and that's from that carbon to nitrogen. When we have soybean there, it's mineralizing nitrogen faster, getting it to it, where that wheat takes longer. Doesn't mean it doesn't get there, it just takes longer to get it, and the corn's already needing it. So what we're all here for is this part. So this is kind of the concept part. So looking at that alfalfa to corn rotation and kind of what it's doing. So we're going to look at a few things. This is research done at Utah State. It's also similar research was done in Minnesota and other parts. I just have this research results to show you. So we're looking at this research trial looked at 3 different types of tillage. We looked at our conventional tillage, we looked at no-till, and then looked at that kind of medium, that strip till. Because we know based on how we till and when we till, we potentially change when that nitrogen is becoming available from the alfalfa crop. And you can see the different things. We're not going to go over this a lot. We'll focus really on this nitrogen availability because we know if we till less, we have some of these issues here or some of the helps. Because if we don't do tillage, then we're not incorporating the residue, which can kind of slow down that decomposition process. This is the trial that we did. So we divided, we had a couple of fields. We divided them up by tillage type and timing. So we had a fall conventional, spring conventional, fall strip till, spring strip till, and then a no-till treatment in these fields. And then within each of those, we actually have an herbicide timing. So we had Roundup Ready alfalfa, which you can't kill with Roundup. So we had to look at some different timings of when to terminate it. So we did a fall timing, a spring, where we tilled and then sprayed in crop about V3, V4 of corn. And then we had a control where we didn't spray at all. And then within each of these timings, we have these nitrogen rates to get that nitrogen response curve to see how and when that response curve flattened, to see how much nitrogen we needed for that corn after alfalfa. So just kind of looking at this, we have a tillage, we have our nitrogen rate, we have our herbicide timing, and then we're kind of looking at yield. This is actually one of the treatments. You don't want your corn to look like this, which is why I do it. But this is where the alfalfa was not controlled well, so don't do that. But you can see the height differences, so you can see stuff, which is fun because sometimes I do work and it's like, I can't see anything. So this project was fun because you see a definite difference with herbicide timing. It was important to control the alfalfa, which makes sense. This is us harvesting it. We actually had to build this thing right here. That was fun. So this is the alfalfa credit. So we did 2 different soils. We did a fine textured soil, higher organic matter, and then a coarse textured soil, lower organic matter, to look at those things here. So this on our y-axis is our corn silage yield, 70% moisture, tons per acre, nitrogen fertilizer rate on our x-axis. So first this line, what we're looking for is we want to see what that response curve, where it flattens out. So when I first started this research, we had some ideas about different tillage types, needing different nitrogen requirements. And this totally killed everything I thought. So fall conventional till, pretty flat. Spring conventional till, pretty flat. Fall strip till, a little bit lower, but flat. Spring strip till, flat, a little bit higher. You can see some yield differences a little bit, but all in all, no till, flat. AKA no nitrogen needed. So that alfalfa decomposing provided all the nitrogen that corn crop needed in the first year. So this is on a fine textured soil, high organic matter. What about coarse textured soils? These are all irrigated too, at what I'm showing you right now. So coarse textured soil, what did we see there? Same thing. Fine or coarse textured soil. So this is 1 year. What about year 2? So this is our coarse and our fine year 1, coarse and fine textures year 2, all flat lines. So what it was showing us is that really we didn't need any nitrogen fertilizer to optimize yield. And I even had enough guts to do this on my own uncle's farm. And it worked. We didn't need any nitrogen there as well. So we did actually use it as well. So it kind of showed us that alfalfa, we looked at that carbon nitration, how it breaks down and can feed the crop. That was sufficient in these cases to supply all the nitrogen. And I know since I left, they've done about 20 other locations in the state of Utah, and same results. Very little nitrogen was needed. But let's move a little bit closer to home. University of Minnesota did a lot of research, both in Minnesota and the region, which is pretty close to us. And my colleagues that I worked with a lot did a lot of the research. So when I moved from Utah to there, we talked a bunch because we've done similar projects, but didn't. So we're going to look at, so the first thing that they did in Minnesota is they looked at alfalfa regrowth, tillage timing, and found out it had no effect. How much alfalfa regrowth there was before they terminated it, or also when they used tillage, fall or spring, it didn't matter as far as it growing it back. So what they did find is they did start to see some textural differences. So they had a medium to fine textured soils. They had more than 4 plants of alfalfa per square foot. 15 of those 16 sites didn't require any nitrogen. 1 of the 16 required 80. We look at silage yield, so that was grain. Look at silage yield, 9 of 15 didn't need any. 6 of 15 needed 40, so very little there. So this right here, so then they said, okay, those are tilled sites. What about no-till sites? After they found out those research results. So here on a no-till field, this top part is going to be grain. Use silage, or silage is on the top. So again, you see silage at 4 locations flat, grain at 7 locations, no-till flat. So no nitrogen requirement. So 7 of 7 didn't need nitrogen requirement in that year. So then they're like, well, what about if we put fall manure on? How does that impact the carbon nitrogen ratio and then subsequent nitrogen fertilization needs? So this is silage yield here, fall manure sites. You can see a couple of sites that need any. A few of them needed a little bit of nitrogen. So we look specifically 5 of 8, 0 pounds, 2 of 8, 88. We had one site that needed more than 100. And we'll summarize kind of what they found. So they took all these sites together and they took 259 sites. This is around the entire Midwest region. And I believe it even encompassed some research in South Dakota. So they found out a lot of it had to do with texture. Dividing it versus fine, coarse, and medium texture was the largest thing they found. There's some other specifics we'll talk about in just a second. But this is what they saw. So medium fine textured soils, if you terminate your alfalfa in the spring, 89 to 97% of the time, no nitrogen was required. If you fall terminated it, it reduced it a little bit, 73 to 90%, no nitrogen. Coarse textured soils were a little more tricky. The research that I saw didn't necessarily affect it, but throughout the Midwest, they had 1 of 11 that didn't need nitrogen, but that's a very small amount of sites. So the coarse texture is a little bit more sensitive on needing nitrogen, which makes sense. They don't have as much organic matter to buffer that nitrogen need. But we'll talk about the rates in just a second for some of these. So for South Dakota, our rates are, our nitrogen recommendations for corn after alfalfa are a little older. So I tend to push people towards the University of Minnesota stuff because they've done more stuff recently and I agree with it. So I haven't spent the money to do it yet to find out the similar stuff because a lot of this was just over the border, which isn't that far. So these are the things that they use. So we're looking at soil texture, irrigated, non-irrigated. Most of our stuff is non. The alfalfa age basically divides it into if it's only 1 year alfalfa and you switch crops or if it's 2 or more. The longer that alfalfa is in, as long as it's not like a heirloom. You're handing it down to your grandkids. It tends to, and I know those because I had some of those growing up, it tends to do better. So we have 1st year corn following alfalfa, and then a lot of the work they did is also looking at 2nd year corn following alfalfa because there's still some nitrogen in there that's being contributed. So we look at this and we first of all, we talked about texture was important. So looking at fine textured soils, irrigated, non-irrigated, 1 year versus 2 or more years, fall or spring, fall, spring terminated. So you can see the different categories there. So see, generally, if we only have 1 year of alfalfa and then go into corn, we tend to need more nitrogen. That's just because there's not as much root biomass that's really breaking down to feed that corn crop. Is my thoughts there. So 1st year alfalfa, fine textured soils, if you're more than 2 years, regardless of fall or spring, you're looking at 0 to 40 pounds of N is what they recommend. So very small amount, but it's also in line with a lot of the things that we've seen. Now, 2nd year alfalfa, they've actually shown 2nd year corn is a little more tricky. A little more site dependent, but they're still looking at ranges. If you've had it in for a couple of years, around 0 to 80. So not a lot, but they're still good there's still a good contribution there. So if we look at medium textured soils, same thing again, 1 year or 2 or more, fall or spring termination, fairly similar. Actually a little bit more. We're still looking at that. We're in that only 1 year, 40 to 80 pounds, otherwise 0 to 40. Is their recommendation that's based on these, 260 sites worth of information. That 2nd year corn, about 80 is what they're recommending there as far as that goes. Coarse textured soils, like I said, that one's a little bit more where they've seen more variation and where they divided irrigated, non-irrigated, because some of our coarse textured soils usually are irrigated depending on where you are. Same thing, a number of years it's been in, fall or spring. And here you can see we're looking at 0 to 40 up here and 0 to 80 over here for 2nd year. But once we hit that coarse texture soil, we're a lot more variable. We're actually closer looking around 70 and sometimes a little bit more if it's only 1 year. But if you've had it in for more than a year, more than a couple of years, you're looking about 70, 100 pounds maybe. And then 2nd year, similar range, just a little bit up about 40 pounds. So this is a lot of their research that they've seen those results on, and it's actually really interesting because they didn't really expect to find this. None of us did. We thought we'd need more nitrogen than these are doing, but a lot of it has to do with the timing of when that nitrogen is becoming available. And if you look at, they've also done research. We did some with looking at alfalfa into spring wheat and winter wheat and other things like that. Those ones tend to need more nitrogen than corn. And a lot of that has to do with your spring wheat and winter wheat, or your spring wheat. It requires nitrogen earlier in the season. If you remember the graphs that we looked at, that we're looking at when that nitrogen becomes available, we first go down, then we slowly go up. As far as nitrogen requirement, that and alfalfa decomposition tend to align really well because it needs it when it's giving it about the same time. But for spring wheat, it needs it earlier. So it's not quite getting up to par sooner. So it does still require a little bit more nitrogen compared to corn when you're talking spring wheat instead of corn. I don't have that data with me right now, but that's some other projects my colleague at Utah State has been working on the last few years. If anyone's interested, I could probably send me an email and I can connect you with some of those results there. I believe University of Minnesota did some research there as well. Let's see. So just an example, these are our recommendations currently, and you'll see that they fairly align pretty well with some of our recommendations. This is just our soybean credit, but this is our alfalfa legume credit. You can see if we have more than the different numbers of plants per square foot, you get the different credits, 50, 150. Most crops are going to be in this area here. And if you look at our recommendation, we don't tell you 0, but if you do the math, like if we take this right here and do, this field goal might be a little bit low, but we'll do the math here for some of this for our current recommendations. Say you have that 150-pound nitrogen credit, and then we don't, maybe you're not no-till. We do the math there, it actually comes out at -46. So 0 is what using that credit does. Even if this credit were down to, just 100, it's still pretty close to that 0 recommendation, which is similar to what we're seeing in other places for that first year corn. So that's what we've seen as far as alfalfa the corn rotation. If you have questions, I can connect to you or answer questions. This is my email. Feel free to reach out there as well. I have time for questions, or I have no idea what time I even started. Okay.